Okay, so the last time, for some reason, you guys couldn't hear me. I'm so sorry. I don't know what happened, but I switched over to my computer and hopefully you can hear. The good thing about the computer is that, okay, let's see. Hello, ha, 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 ha. I think you guys can hear me. The good thing about the computer is that I can see the volume, so it shows that you guys can hear me. But I don't even know where you guys were like not able to hear me anymore. So I'm just gonna start where I left. Basically, I was saying, just make. I'm just trying to warn you, or for you to be aware that words that really like threw me off. Honestly, let me get my glasses. That looks weird. Oh, nah. No one's even here yet, but I'm just gonna start anyway. So basically, what I was trying to say was to beware or just to understand the difference between people that are giving you righteous advice versus people who are advising you based on their own interest and opinion and knowledge. So once you've learned Islam for yourself, what your obligations are, yay, it's all good now. Thanks. Once you know like what your obligations are of being a Muslim and you're knowledgeable enough to basically know what's what, then you could in bleh, dive deep into the general community because you have a solid foundation built out for yourself. I do want to say that there's a difference between like the general Muslim community as a whole and the Revert Muslim community. I think the Muslim Revert communities can sometimes be more helpful for reverts, and there's less policing sometimes within the revert community. It depends. But yeah, I would just advise to never take what someone say to you for the like when it comes to Islam, um as face value or as fact. I would advise to just do your research. Always ask them like for the source of what they're like talking about so that you could go back home and research it yourself. Unless they're like someone that's a scholar or something along those lines. And even that, like you can still like do research if you want to go above and beyond. Um, and just, I pray that Allah just guides you to the truth, inshallah. But it's best that you start by focusing on small groups of Muslims, and ask for advice and guidance. If you have like too much of a big group, you can get overwhelmed with different opinions and it can become discouraging or even like confusing because these people, um, they might just have like different upbringings or cultural understandings of Islam. So make sure that when you do have a small group, it's of people that you trust, that are like with good intentions and they're knowledgeable in Islam. And one thing I would emphasize on is to use your brain. I mean, Allah gave you a brain, so use it. It's just that simple. Like, He gifted you with it, so just use it. Like, just because someone tell you something, don't mean la 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 la. Yeah, this is right. That's not the case. Like, go look into it yourself. A lot of Muslims these days, I feel like, they live in genuine, in my opinion. Like, they just follow Islam like robotically or like like a ritualistic like practice almost. And some people pray without even understanding what the words mean or what they're even praying about. And my advice to both reverts and Muslim is to basically use their brain to understand and to use their intellect that Allah gave them to do research and understand Islam. When you're praying something, you should know what you're praying. You should know what you're saying, because how can you really say that you're being genuine and sincere, and Allah loves sincerity, if you don't know what you're saying? So Allah cares about sincerity. So be sincere in your journey to Islam. Don't be robotic. Anyways, where do you start as a Muslim, right? You start with the five pillars. You start with what the is obligational, not what's optional. Focus on the things that are necessary, and not what's considered sunnah, right? Focus on what is obligatory, which are the five pillars. Now now that we've learned about like the basics of how to start your revert journey, you want to start gaining more knowledge about Islam. You probably asking, where should I start when it comes to knowledge? Like, yeah, I got my prayers down now. I understand the basics of what the five pillar is. What do I do now? A good place to start, I would say, is Islamic Resource Hub. Our Islamic Resource Hub has everything on there. Well, not everything. We're still building it out. It's a breathing and growing doc. But start with either the Revert resource that's provided to you by your local masjid, or if you're going online, then use our Islamic Notion Hub. But enough promo. Seriously, though, there is no wrong or right place on what to start learning or where to start learning, as long as you're learning Islam. With I would say to just start with what interests you. I think starting from a place of interest, like, it will make your journey a lot easier. For me, trying to see if I have the book next to me. I don't have the book next to me, but for me, I started with science because I love science. So I started with a book that says, like, it's like a guide to understanding Islam or something along those lines. And it's a book that talks about all the scientific discoveries that were revealed in the Quran before scientists even knew about it. And I thought that was pretty cool. So you could start like something like that, or you could start by looking into what jinns are. You could start by learning about the prophet, peace be upon him, or you could start by learning about the angels. You could start anywhere you please, as long as it's related to Islam. But I would like to say, like, something that I wish I would have started with in the beginning, or that I knew to start with in the beginning, was to start by learning Allah first, like, before learning science or anything else. So that's what I'm going to be planning to start doing. When I say start by learning about Allah, you're probably like, what does that even mean? If you're reading the Quran, you probably already know about Allah. Well, like, for example, you'll learn like the 99 names of Allah and their meaning, memorize them, know how to use them for like different prayers, what sins are considered unforgivable to Allah, what are things that you can do on a regular basis that pleases Allah, what makes him angry, you know, just discover what Allah loves, likes, dislikes, and plan to go deep in that. So hopefully, maybe I'll like post my journey of like self-discovery and understanding Allah here when I'm live. Maybe I'll tune in with whatever I'm reading and read it to you guys. Maybe I'm not 100% sure yet. We'll see. But like I mentioned, I would go back to my brain like froze for a second there. I am so sorry. But yeah, I would just start with Allah. That's something that I wish I would have done in the beginning instead of starting with science, because now I feel like I'm kind of working backwards by trying to like start with Allah and learning those things. So like I mentioned, I think in the beginning I talked about the Quran, right? And this is one of the most important things that I learned when I was starting Islam. Shout out to Teslim for teaching me this. And I think a lot of like reverts don't know this. And I think it's something that's really important when you're reading the Quran. Let me get my Quran real quick so I can show you what I mean. Okay, I'm just gonna pull open a random part. So I don't know if you guys, oh, my notes. Hold on a second here. So you guys see those parentheses? Ugh, I don't even know if y'all can see them, but there's parentheses in the Quran, right? And the number one tip that I learned about reading the Quran is understanding that those parentheses are not actually the Quran. There's someone else's opinion. It's a scholar's opinion or interpretation. It's not what Allah gave to the messenger and the people that were back in those times. Those parentheses didn't even exist back then. Okay, those are just things that they put there to help us understand. There's someone else's interpretation. So I advise when you first read the Quran to try to read without the parentheses. Um, and I know a lot of people are gonna like be like, "What do you mean? You should read with the parentheses." But I would advise not reading with the parentheses, just because only if it's like absolutely necessary. Like if there's a word there that you've never seen before, something, then I would say, okay, you could read the parentheses. But the reason why I would say not to read the parentheses when you first start is to avoid leading yourself to confusion. Because and I will also advise like reading different translations of when you're doing English, like if Arabic isn't your first language, of course, reading different translations of the Quran if possible, because sometimes you Arabic is a very complex language, right? And so sometimes there's words in Arabic that can't be translated to a specific word. So then the translator has to use their interpretation instead. So sometimes you find times where what they say in one version can differ slightly, and that small difference can make you a bit confused when you're reading. So I would say to read different versions too, to get a more clearer or more deeper understanding of the Quran when you first read it. So to summarize what I said, try to avoid reading the parentheses, and try to look at different versions. um, and the next tip I would say would be to, I think I mentioned it before, would be about verifying the sources. If someone tells you something new that you never heard about before, um, I would just once again go and check for yourself, ask them for the sources so you could go back and check for yourself. This is only applicable for like people that didn't study Islam, like your Muslim friends or like random people that tell you things. Or there's even people that go above and beyond and like look into what the scholar says themselves so they could get a deeper understanding of it as well. There's no harm in just double checking. If anything, Allah will bless you for going the extra mile to learn more about Him and about what He wants you to do and how He wants you to live. So that being said, we're still talking about the Quran. We're going to talk about hadiths. I think as reverts, like the Quran has a lot going on in it, right? Especially if you get the Arabic and the English version. You have the Arabic version, and then you have the parentheses, and then you have the side with the hadiths. And like when you're first reading it, sometimes you don't even know, like, that's not a continuation of thing at the bottom. You're not supposed to read from top all the way to bottom. Those are completely separate things. Sometimes like you could start it and you could be like, oh, let's say that it ended at this line at the top, and you see this line is supposed to be the hadith. You just go down there, you get super confused. So I think it's important to understand that hadiths are separate in a way from the Quran. Like, for example, I guess it'll be best for me to show you. Let's see if I could find something to show you guys. uh For example, I don't know if you guys are going to be able to see this, but for example, sometimes I see people mess up where they are reading here and then they think, oh, maybe I have to continue like reading here. And sometimes they'll read here. Sometimes that mixes up like with the flow of what you're reading. So I advise finish up reading what you're reading first, and then if you want, you could go back and then read the hadiths that are down here, whatever thing is down here, so that you don't get confused and mixed up or anything along those lines. And then when it comes to hadiths, there's things that you should know as well. Would be that there's three different types or of like hadiths. There is authentic, good, and weak hadiths. And so the authentic ones are the most reliable ones with like a strong chain of narration and accurate content, and they're considered the most trustworthy source of information after the Quran. It's best, in my opinion, to only stick to those hadiths personally, if you do want to read hadiths. Also, something that you should know, it's not mandatory. Some Muslims will tell you, oh, it's mandatory, you have to follow the hadiths. They're lying to you. The only thing that you got to do is read the Quran. It's recommended that you read the hadiths, but it's not mandatory. Don't let anybody tell you it's mandatory. It's a recommendation. You know, it's recommended. That's it. Um, so, anyways, if you do want to read the hadiths, I would say to stick to the authentic ones or the good ones. It don't even make sense for you to look at the weak ones, honestly, because the good ones, those are like generally reliable, right? But may have some minor issues in the chain of narration or the context itself. So personally, for me, I'm like, why do I want to read something that's generally reliable or might have minor issues? If that's the case, might as well read the Bible or something else. That's how I look at it. If I want to read the hadith, I'm just going to stick to the authentic. Anytime someone tells me something about a good hadith, then I'll be like, okay, cool, whatever. The weak hadith, it's just like, I don't even want to hear that. Like, those hadiths are considered like unreliable, due to like the weakness in the chain of narration or the content itself. They're like mostly not considered valid source of Islamic law or belief, and they're most likely wrong. I don't want to, I'm gonna put it in the chat so that it'll be here. Wait, it might be too long for me to put in the chat, but I'm gonna put it here so that you guys can look into the three different types of hadiths later. So that you guys could look into that later. It's important to note that like the classification of hadiths is a complex process and requires like a specialized knowledge and expertise to be able to classify what is authentic, good, and weak. So just keep that in mind. But like I said, it's not mandatory. The thing that's mandatory for you is to follow the 5 pillars and to read the Quran, and but hadiths are not mandatory. A lot of people say that they are. Some scholars say that they're not. And I more likely agree with the ones that say stick to the authentic. You don't have to worry about the other ones. That's what I agree to, or what I subscribe to. Another thing that I would keep in mind would be that if you don't speak Arabic, to just search up like a trusted scholar, like when you're looking at these hadiths, and let them interpret those hadiths for you, um, if you're interested in it, because sometimes the translation can be confusing and it can lead you like astray. You could be mad confused. So it's important to listen to someone that does that for a living, like their whole life is based on studying the hadith. That's what I would say to do. So yeah, this was a lot more than I thought I was going to talk about, but I just want to summarize everything that we spoke about today. So basically, what we spoke about is understanding like, what if I was a new revert, if I was someone looking into Islam, what would I do? Where would I start? I would start by one, understanding what the 5 pillars of Islam are and try to practice those first. Understanding that I don't need to jump right into a community first off. I can just have a small group of people who are trusted and I know they have good intentions for me, and I can ask those people questions, but I will always look for the sources myself to verify what they're saying is true and not take it as face value or as facts. Understanding that when you're reading the Quran, that the parentheses are someone else's interpretation, and that there's different types of hadiths, and to keep in mind about that. And it's recommended to just look at the authentic one, and if you want the good but not the weak ones. Be selective of who you have in your Muslim circle, build your own understanding of Islam, and focus on your relationship with God, and use your intellect. I probably talked about some other things. I don't really remember. This was really long, a lot longer than I thought it was going to be. But thank you guys for tuning in to my little conversation on, practicing Islam and tips that I have for reverts. And remember to like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Salam. Bye.